Russia is making $100 million a day from oil sales to Europe, and they're on track to make $321 billion this year. Let's talk about that. So currently, despite all the sanctions being imposed on Russia by the Western world, they're still receiving well over $100 million from the European nations. And this is also in spite of the fact that Gazprom, one of Russia's biggest oil companies, has cut the daily supply of oil to Europe by 75%. And they are still making more money and sending over enough oil to outpace what they were making pre-COVID. And because of all the price increases, they're obviously making more money with the oil. Additionally, they have increased their supply of oil to China and India. They've now overtaken Saudi Arabia in providing oil to China, and they've overtaken Saudi Arabia in providing oil to India. And they're redirecting their exports into BRICS nations only, which BRICS nations are Brazil, India, Russia, China, South Africa. They make up 40% of the world's population. And apparently they're coming together to try and make a global reserve currency. So Russia really has a lot of leverage right now, and that's because, one, the European nations are greatly dependent upon Russia to provide oil and gas. If I'm not mistaken, most of the oil and gas comes from Russia, like 40 to 45%. Both of the oil and gas come from Russia to the EU. And Trump had warned about this years ago, and they laughed at him. And now you have the European Union going to South Africa to try to get more coal. You have countries like Italy, the Netherlands, Denmark, and a couple others getting coal imports from South Africa. And that's because they're trying to wean themselves off the dependency on Russia. And by trying to follow their green agenda, it has failed them. It isn't helping them whatsoever. It's not making them energy independent. It's making them increasingly dependent upon the old ways of energy, which aren't necessarily a bad thing, like coal. Germany, for example, as I'm sure many of you know by now, had to fire up the coal plants because of the same thing. They're not getting the same, well, not the same thing, but they're not getting the same amount of gas or oil that they were getting from Russia before, because Gazprom has slashed the capacity of Nord Stream 1's pipeline that transfers natural gas from Russia to Germany. So what we're witnessing right now is Russia just absolutely crushing the war. They are. They're beating Ukraine. They're beating the Western nations, and they haven't even imposed sanctions yet, which I'm sure they will, and I'm sure China will too. I'm not exactly sure how those sanctions will work, but I guarantee you they're going to have more of a detrimental effect on the Western world than the sanctions we've imposed on them, because we are extremely dependent upon China for a lot of manufacturing goods. And so if China decides to sanction us and not allow any of their exports to go to us, that would really, really hurt us. And we see the partnership between Russia and China growing. The alliance is growing between them. And the West is currently attacking certain partnerships that Russia has. For instance, the civilian bombing in Damascus and Syria. Israel did that, and it was to provoke a reaction. But Russia has been very calm, cool, and collective during this whole thing, and which is why they're winning, which is why their currency is doing so well, which is why their economy is doing so well. Another way that I think that the European Union and Western nations are attempting to provoke Russia is by what took place in Kaliningrad. I'm sure you guys are aware of that now, where Lithuania stated, oh no, the European Union said that we must. not allow any Russian trains into Kaliningrad. So we have to blockade that. And recently, Russia had just responded saying that we will not act diplomatically, we will act practically, and they'll potentially cut off any transport from Lithuania into Russia. And I think that that would have a greater effect on Lithuania than it would Russia. Now, there's another thing too that's more so symbolic and probably means nothing, but I think it's important to note that Ukraine had just received candidacy for the EU, to join the EU. Although this process takes about 10 years or, at least a few years in order for them to get accepted in. And Ukraine is already not the Ukraine that it was last year or 2 years ago, being that Russia occupies 80% of their key cities that are producing their main GDP. So Ukraine may be just a sliver of itself by the time it may get accepted into the European Union. But I think it's important to note, because it could be another way that the West attempts to provoke Russia by saying, oh, well, you're going to war with a potential European Union nation. And although Putin said that that's not that big of a deal because they're just an economic union, they're not a military alliance, as we see what was taking place in Lithuania, they can be used in a more direct way. So that's really what I wanted to talk about today. Russia is winning the war on all fronts. They're getting stronger. I think that we're witnessing the fall of the Western Empire. America's at the helm of that, and we are not doing very well. And I think that we keep provoking Russia into direct conflict with America. And if we keep poking that bear, they will eventually respond. And if we go to land war with Russia, we will probably lose, because the Russian military on foot is stronger than the American military. And we are just witnessing World War III unfold in front of our eyes. And this may call for some sort of false flag event with nuclear weapons because of the provoking of Russia and us getting our butts kicked on the ground. The United States may say, you know what, let's set off a nuke or do some false flag event to then put people into this ultimate fear stage. And that may be the way that they push through the green agenda. It's through World War III, false flag events of nuclear fallout, and then reconfiguring our society. I don't know. You let me know what you think. Hit the plus sign, leave a comment below, and hit that subscribe button. Much love. Peace.